Hey guys, it's Mountain Walk, and today we're going to be talking a little bit about pre-modern. This time we're going to be looking at the last year or so, a little bit longer than a year since I did my last state of the format for pre-modern, which was in August of 2019. So a little bit longer than a year. Makes sense that I'd probably do these at the beginning of the next year, which is usually when I do the state of MTG kind of stuff. So, um, yeah, we'll probably try and do these on January, typically. But anyway, so we're looking back the last year and some change, and we're going to be looking at the trends of everything that's going on and other things that aren't even specific to the game that are certainly affecting us, and everything in between. So let's get to it. All right. So the biggest thing is, of course, uh, which as I predicted last time, and also wasn't. You don't need to be Nostradamus to predict this, but the format grew quite a bit. Lots and lots of people, so that's very cool. Definitely more interest in the format. Lots of fun stuff going on here, especially since 2020 was a bad year for regular Magic formats. So that's good for pre-modern because it's more or less the complete opposite of these very poorly designed cards, unmanaged formats, kind of stuff going on in normal Magic. That sucks, but them's the breaks, right? So good for us, good for us, good for pre-modern. So can't that's the silver lining, right? That's the silver lining around the crappy storm cloud. Uh, anyways, lots of brewing, lots of new decks. So that's very cool. Lots of interesting, new, weird. I mean, not only just like new decks, but also iterating on established archetypes, like things like White Weenie or like the Mono Black decks. Lots of stuff going on there. Obviously, people can't play at shops, or at least haven't been able to for quite some time, or at least in most places in the US. But people have been able to set up and play remotely via like webcam and things like that and other different programs. I know you can actually play on like Tabletop Simulator. That's kind of cool. Um, but yeah, so people have figured out a way around our current lockdown predicament. So that's great. For me, I actually played most of my pre-modern with my friends in real life. So it's a little unfortunate that I can't do that. And I need to I just don't like webcam play. It sucks. It's like it's just like it's the difference between like a ham sandwich and like going to a nice five-star restaurant, right? Like one will is good, you won't die, you'll be fine. But like the experience is just so different, right? You wanna it's just not fun. It's just not fun playing with webcam. It sucks. It's not fun. I don't like it. Boo. But other people are more inclined to that kind of stuff. And of course, we got more spikes. What wouldn't be a year in MTG in the current year of Magic without more spikes? Very similar to a lot of what happened in 2018, where we had like the Bitcoin stuff. It does seem like there is some sort of relation between people like Bitcoin spikes and then like people selling off or buying into reserve list cards. Then of course there's also like the government stimulus too, which was caused a spike in stuff. I think around last year, around July, I was noting like, all right, here's a bunch of cards you should really invest into. Um, and the biggest one is like Undiscovered Paradise because it sees played in a bunch of different decks. And it was very cheap at the time. I think it was like $5, and now I think it's like $15 a pop, maybe even more. I'd have to check. I know there's a lot of spikes on random reserve list cards, even just recently. So it's hard to tell what's going on because like it feels like we're still in the middle of these buyouts and spikes and sort of just normal buying trends when people have extra money. And of course, with the lockdown thing, a lot of people not having extra money. I mean, it's hard to like the price on a lot of stuff. For example, like modern cards, the modern indexes fell quite a bit. Um, some of it, of course, can be contributed to just cards with a lot of price memory just losing value. So things like Tarmogoyf or whatever, Vendilion Click. These are historically expensive cards, but more or less only kept their value just due to price memory, because name recognition, but they didn't really, the amount of play and demand just wasn't there, so they've slowly been losing um, value over time, and I think, of course, the current trends accelerated that. So, you know, not good time for a lot of people. But reserve list cards are pretty much always, very rarely, even if they lose some value, they never go back to their previous price point. And some of them are legitimately undervalued, but I think I'll make a follow-up video on pricing and stuff, more or less eyed at Premodern, talking about foils and reserve list stuff and where the heck are these prices now. So yeah, that'll be interesting. Oh, and we're going to be looking at some deck lists. Or, well, more specifically, entries of archetypes. Last time I did this, it was 10, because there just wasn't very many decks on there at all. This time I just doubled it to 20, because there's a lot more here, a lot more information, tons and tons of decks. Yeah. And why did I choose that? It's arbitrary. That's right. I couldn't come up or figure out a metric to really sort of group this up in a way that sort of made sense. Or at least that I could sort of do it like objectively or whatever, instead of just like, I'm choosing 20 because it's 20 and it's double of 10. So, yep. So let's go ahead and start looking at what's happened in this last year or so. All right. So, thank you to TC Decks. TC Decks, very wonderful resource for looking at pre-modern stuff. As you can see, we got a whole bunch of stuff here. A lot of decks. I probably won't go through all of them very in-depth, but for things like Sly, Landstill, Goblins, Survival, these decks all grew quite a bit from their last ones. And I mean, like Survival, which was 19 and then 86 copies currently. So that's like 4 times growth, or well, more than 4 times. Same with Goblins, like a 4-fold increase. Landstill's like 5-fold. I mean, lots and lots and lots of good stuff. Or I guess that'd be 4-fold too. I'm bad at math. But yeah. And of course, some of these actually had to combine categories because some decks were listed separately. Like some of the tax rack decks were not listed with White Weenie, but they were basically just White Weenie decks. And like I said, there's not a huge, there's a lot of different variations of the White Weenie deck. I mean, obviously they all usually play some amount of like Mother of Runes and Swords of Plowshares and Disenchants, and some of the Shadow guys or stuff like Silver Knight. But I mean, there's just a huge array. And then of course, if they start splashing colors, are they playing like Land Tax Scroll Rack? Are they just playing Land Tax and stuff like Firestorm and Mox Diamond? I mean, who knows, right? There's all sorts of stuff that goes into it. So there's really no sort of generic White Weenie list. Although obviously they all play like Savannah Lines, right? Savannah Lines is great. Savannah Lions, Mother Loons, Mother of Runes, that's good stuff. But yeah, so those decks barely made it in. Lots and lots of experimentation going on there. I have no idea what would be the best one. I did a deck, that was like one of the first decks I did for like my pre-modern deck was a White Weenie deck. That Splash Blue was very sweet. Because obviously, what's the biggest problem with a slow deck with no reach? Is that you're just going to get stomped on by decks that have a better end game, that are interacting on axes that you can't interact on, so say stuff like combo decks or whatever. And so what's the best solution to that? Play Meddling Mage. Just play Meddling Mage. Light blue splash stuff for, maybe Spiketail Hatchling, like Spiketail Hatchling, that's a good card. Maybe some tax and stuff, some Wastelands, all sorts of good stuff. That's a fun deck. But yeah, so White Weenie decks all over the place. New inclusions would be like Pink Prison, barely made it. Some of these decks are only on here, or aren't more represented on here, probably because the price of things like Sarah Sanctum, say for Enchantress, Pink Prison, which needs Mox Diamonds, of course, very expensive. Yeah, so that's a big problem. So even something like Stifle Not Worthy, Phyrexian Dreadnoughts have been like Like the cheapest I've seen them at for a while was like 35, and then like they just spiked a couple times, and now they're at like I think around 100 a piece. So some of these decks are getting pretty expensive. So yeah, some of them aren't as represented just due to that. But yeah, Pink Prison, 21 copies. That's a pretty good deck. Again, another artifact, sort of enchantments, prison-based deck with Devastating Dreams. Definitely pretty sweet. Then we have Mud, mostly mono brown, but there are a few Tinker, style decks in there. But the great thing about mono brown is you don't have to worry about being mana screwed, right? You're like, oh, I can't cast my blue spells. And you get to play all the good utility lands. So Wasteland and Port and Mistress Factory and maybe like Dust Bowl and Crystal Vein and X and Y and Z and just pretty much all the good lands that you want to play. You don't have to pick and choose. So that's kind of nice when all of your lands actually do stuff. Mono Black saw a big growth. So lots of different iterations on the mono black. So just disruption plus black weenies. Madness didn't grow that much, just only like twice. So 14 copies originally, then 30 copies now. Again, not very surprising because the deck's a little lackluster. Definitely missing something. I think it's just doesn't have access to the cards it needs to be good. Terrageddon, again, there's all sorts of tax rack stuff. Like this is one of the most popular cores of cards because like the format's definitely slower, grindier, and land tax plus scroll rack will provide tons and tons of card advantage, a lot of card manipulation, so that's very good. So yeah, Terrageddon's definitely a very good deck. Big fat green creatures plus Armageddon and or Cataclysm is it's a good combo. It's a good combo. So definitely a fun deck to play because, well, it's a fun old like deck from Legacy. And who doesn't like Terravor? Terravor's sweet. Then we have, let's see, other couple new ones would be like Stasis, Reanimator. Not a ton of Reanimator, not a ton of Stasis. I think Stasis might just be because like it's not super fun to play with or against. Although I certainly like those style of decks. We got elves on here. Lots of variation of the elf decks. You're playing more land destruction with like Mishra's Helix and stuff, and Plowlander, or you playing more stuff like with Biorhythm and Overrun, or who knows, right? But most of the core elves themselves are the same. It's like 14 forest, 4 cradles. That's pretty set in place too. We got the Devourer combo decks. So the Phyrexian Devourer, blue-red sort of artifact-based decks. Those are pretty set in stone as well too. Not a lot of iteration there that you can really do because it just has so many cards it sort of needs to find to protect its combo. Dead Guy, of course, black-white, aggro control, mid-range kind of thing. That's a pretty good deck. You just gotta make concessions to the mana base, so maybe playing a couple more lands you want, or maybe having to play stuff like City of Brass as well, just to be able to curve out, to really cast these powerful spells like Gerard's Verdict. That's definitely very good. Yeah, so a lot of good stuff. A huge growth in the number of archetypes that are represented here. So that's pretty sweet. And of course, there's innumerable other one-ofs. They're like Battle of Wits decks, lands style decks, the Hermit Druid decks, all sorts of stuff. So yeah, that's pretty cool. But yeah, this is mostly, again, what would be expected. Again, what are the best decks? So we have, like the Rock and Sly and Goblins and some sort of survival deck and land still being very well represented because they're more or less some of the better decks to play. So yeah, not too surprising here. Yeah. Also stuff like the Psychotog, lots of different variations of that. I mean, it's like it's hard to figure out what to not play because there's so many good cards to play, whether just straight blue-black or splashing red. Certainly Fire Ice is a very powerful card, very great. Who doesn't love Fire Ice? Really good against all of the aggro decks. Never just a dead card in general. You can, tap stuff so it can cycle. You can kill stuff. You can tap anything. It says permanent lands, creatures, artifacts, enchantments if you want to be crazy. Um, yeah, so lots of variation in the Tog decks. Still haven't been able to figure out which one I like the most. Uh, but yeah, there's a lot of good stuff. Do you want to play Mental Note? Do you want to play more the can trippy versions of Tog? We're playing like Opt and Mental Note and maybe Sleight of Hand or something like that, or what? Do you want to play Shadow Mage as an additional source of card advantage? I mean, what are we doing? Who knows? Lots of brewing, lots of possible stuff you can do there. Um, but yeah, this is lots of good decks here. Lots of cool, interesting things. But again, nothing too unexpected. Definitely very sweet. Very good for the format in general. All right. So yeah, I got a lot of the same trends from last year. Best decks are the ones that are the most represented, the most consistent. So that's definitely pretty sweet. Nothing, like I said, nothing too out of the ordinary. It's not like Sly dropped off the face of the world or whatever. People stopped playing it. Um, More decks, of course, made the cut this year. A lot of this is just due to it was a very small pool or smaller pool of players in the beginning in 2019, 2018. But now we have many, many more people playing. So, yeah, lots of different archetypes, more brewing, more iterating. Um, so yeah, not very surprising that more decks made the cut this year. Um, Certainly makes sense, and it's like they're very different decks, right? Because there's like a lands-based deck that people are still working on. Then there's like again more artifact-based stuff, and sometimes it's like artifacts and enchantments with like Pink Prison or just like Mud, where it's just an artifact-based deck. There's enchantment-based decks, of course, like Enchantress, and of course stuff like Parfait, which obviously didn't make the cut, but there's all sorts of decks that are being worked on just in general. So that's very cool, very cool. Metagame is still developing, so that's again to be expected. A lot, like I said, some decks are more or less solidified, like 90%. Like there are some metagame slots or some flex slots or whatever, but a lot of decks are like Landstill, Sly, The Rock, are for the most part like you're not gonna see anything too weird in there. Um, and of course, yeah, I mentioned earlier, Tatrac is everywhere. It's just kind of in everything. So it's not like exactly its own deck because it can support all sorts of different strategies from like mid range to control to combo, or not, excuse me, not combo, but board control, prison style stuff. So very cool, very cool. Yeah, like I said, White Weenie has no real stock list. There are all cards that they play in common and like a strategy, right? Like attack with white creatures, but some are monocolor, some play tons of different colors because Mox Diamond and Land Tax and Undiscovered Paradise. So lots of good stuff going there. Lots of good stuff going there. So more growth, more decks, more interesting stuff. Um, yeah, it's just good stuff. Good stuff. So things are looking good so far. Definitely the format looks great. You can pretty much more or less still pretty much play whatever you want. Like I said, this is just again due to the nature of everything more or less just being roughly about the same power level. Um, there are obviously some decks that are better and more consistent, like the more explosive or combo decks or whatever, have more issues because like you have to, you actually have weaknesses. Um, so so everything is like very good, very balanced. Um, and so I like that. I like that. That's pretty nice. So especially people that are just getting into the format, you're like, oh shoot, I can't play this one deck I really wanted to play, 20 years ago. Crap. It's like, well, you can pretty much play anything. Again, obviously there are better decks and there are worse decks, but the gulf isn't too wide to where it's like, oh, I'll never have a chance, right? And so yeah, of course, the rising price on reserve list cards is a problem and will certainly lock some people out of playing some decks. Again, yeah, look at Mox Time and look at Survival of the Fittest. Um, but there are certainly alternatives, right? So there's a lot of decks that don't play any reserve list cards and are still fairly competitive. So that's pretty neat. It's pretty neat. So yeah, and a lot of cards, say like Land Tax has gotten a reprint um, recently. So I mean, some of these cards are still getting reprinted, and so their price isn't going to be super high forever. Land Tax, actually the new art's really sweet. I like the chest. The chest. I mean, I like the goofy the goofy tax collector guy on the Legends art, but yeah, so everything's looking good. Everything's looking good. The power of decks, the balanced metagame, all the different things I can see play. Everything looks great, minus just the price of reserve list cards. And if you have the reserve list cards in question, then I mean you're fine. No big deal. No big deal. And like I said, yeah, there's no real danger of being solved, so to speak. I guess it depends on what people mean by solved. Like it's a more or less a closed format, sans like any bannings or unbannings. Like I don't think anything deserves to be banned. I don't think there's obviously no obvious card that's like too good. But there are a couple of unbannings. But yeah, it's a closed system, and even though if things like are solved, like there's nothing that's just going to be too good. There's almost always some ridiculous sideboard hate card that you can play against certain decks. I guess that's the one nice thing about them, just like going going insane with hosers back in the day. Stuff like Chill against red decks, Null Rod against artifacts decks, all the hate against every single color, like Elemental Blasts, stuff like Choke, and yada yada yada, on and on and on. So lots of good stuff there. Lots of good stuff there. So yeah, it's definitely in a good place in the short term and the long term. So yeah, that's it. Everything's going according to plan. It's all good. I like it a lot. We'll probably see in the future probably a lot of the same stuff, just more growth, some more brewing. Everyone always wants to make wonky combo decks with wonky cards. It's not really my thing, but if you want to play wonky stuff, people should go for it. Really cool. Yeah, so we'll see more exposure, more growth, more people wanting to play it. So that's pretty sweet. That's pretty sweet. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So overall, things are looking great. I'm liking it. Good format, good stuff, lots of nice people, good community. You can't go wrong there. So that's it. That's it for today, guys. That's for our retrospective look at the last year in Premodern, and it's coming up roses. So thanks for stopping by, guys, and have a great day.